Well, it's 12 o'clock and welcome everyone. My name is Stephanie Aden. I'm Executive Director of AIA Spokane. And today we are partnering with the DBIA Northwest region with AIA Spokane to bring you our last and final presentation or webinar for Architecture Month. And that title today is the Podium Part 1, it's Inception through Construction. And you will be getting credit if you're an AIA member, one learning unit. And you should have given me your AIA member number as you signed up for the webinar, but if you did not, go ahead and email me at office@aiaspokane.org and I'll make sure that everybody gets credit for the course today. So we have a good group. We've got over 75 of you guys joining, and so we appreciate the participation for this great project that is currently in construction just north of the river. So I also want to thank CSI Spokane. They have been a great sponsor this month. They have been great in supporting our Spokane dining scene. We are giving away a $50 gift card at the end of this webinar. So stay tuned for that. And also I'll be tallying up at the end of this week the total number of attendees. The people that had the most attendance to the various events that we had will win an additional $50 gift card to some restaurants here in Spokane. So we'll stay tuned for that as well. So since we are giving credit today, I do want to go ahead and quickly go through the learning objectives for this course. Number one, you'll discover the advantages and disadvantages of the design build process. You'll also learn the key concepts and significance of marketing and design coordination during the design build process. You'll understand the importance of collaboration between the owner, design team, marketing from concept to reality during the entire process. Explore the methods of delivering environmental, community safety, and welfare and energy sustainable benefits to the community through the design build process. So obviously you found out that this is a design build project, and which means we have a great panel of owners, architects, and builders. From the owner's side, we've got Ashley Blake from Spokane Sports, Stephanie Curran from the Spokane Public Facilities Districts, and from the architecture side, we've got Colin Anderson from Integra's Architecture, Neil Davis from Davis Architecture, and then on the build side, we've got Andrew Brenner from Lighted Construction, and then coming in to help out with the creative and the branding, we've got CK Anderson of Helvetica, and they'll go ahead and do some further introductions as they get started with the presentation. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Colin, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I hope you guys enjoy this presentation, and I'll be back with you at the end.
Great, thanks, Stephanie. So excited to have everybody here. Looks like we've got a good group of 75 to 80 practitioners in the AEC industry joining us. We're gonna start off. I just want to do really brief intros of everybody on the panel here. So let's go to that slide. We'll just start kind of in the order that we're going to be presenting today. So Stephanie, if you want to kick it off.
Hi, hello everyone. I'm Stephanie Curran. I'm the CEO of the Spokane Public Facilities District. And I just want to disclosure, I told my colleagues here that I actually am on vacation, and I tried to do a virtual background for this, but all the choices were beach scenes. So I figured I might as well just have the actual beach scene. So that's why I'm looking like I'm not in an actual office.
And Ashley Blake, I'm on staff at Spokane Sports. We're going to serve as the sales, marketing, and game day management for the Podium.
Yeah, Colin Anderson with Integra's Architecture. I was the project designer and project manager.
And I'm Neil Davis with Davis Architects. We're the sports architect and assisted in programming.
And I'm CK Anderson with Helvetica, and we are responsible for facility branding.
Hi everyone, Andrew Brenner here with Lighted Construction, project manager for the Podium project. I've been fortunate enough to be on the project from some of the early design phases and all the way through construction here, which is nearing completion and should be wrapping up near the end of September.
Well, great. So I think it's important before we get too far along, I wanted to really show this slide. As Stephanie had mentioned in her intro, it's a design build project, a progressive design build project, getting much more common. So I don't need to go into all the details of that, but what it really means is that the entire team, which you see a lot of the companies that were involved here, were on from day one. When Neil and I started taking trips, we had Leidig taking trips with us. We had mechanical contractors taking trips with us to look at facilities. So my first sketch was done with a team of contractors and everybody else and the owners. So a lot of logos on the screen here, but it's been an amazing process with a lot of amazing partners. And we'll get more into kind of how that process works when we get to the design build section later on. So I think to start, before we hand this over to, I'm going to hand this over to Stephanie and to Ashley to really talk about how this project got started. We've got a really cool video that we worked with our partners at ILF Media, who happen to be neighbors to this site. So working with ILF, we put together this really good marketing video that helps to, I think, really explain the project and sell the project. So let's start with that, and then Stephanie and Ashley, I'll let you guys take it over.
My gosh, that gets me so emotional watching that. Even though I knew I was going to be out of town on this day, I really wanted to be a part of this presentation because I think that this venue and this project has such a great story from inception to what we're going to be able to do in the future. And the thing that I'm honestly most excited about when I get to talk about this is the collaborative effort that it took to make this happen. And you know, what I think stands out in this project as compared to some others is three pretty impactful components that I would say are collaboration, location, and partnership, which is how we came to be here. So the first thing is there were multiple public entities that had to come together to make this project happen. And it's very rare that many public entities can collaborate together, especially as well as we did. There were definitely times where we gave in. We thought this wasn't going to happen, but you know, giving in is not the same as giving up, and we never ever gave up. This project, really, the inception was probably 15, actually probably more than that years ago now, when the Sports Commission saw that there was a need for indoor track and field west of the Mississippi. Most of the all of the venues except for ours right now for indoor track and field are on the East Coast and the Southeast. And it was an untapped market for Spokane that the Sports Commission identified and wanted to basically set the ball rolling to make this happen. And you know, the numbers are pretty staggering about what this venue can do for our community. 20,000 additional visitors anticipated each year, 50,000 additional hotel stays each year, and over 30 million in additional visitor spending each year. So additional to what we're already getting with tourism. And to give you an idea, when people come into our community for sports, whether it's youth sports or professional sports, they tend to spend anywhere from $150 to $350 a day on hotel dining and shopping. So that's very significant. They come into your community, they spend their money, and then they leave. So they're not a drain on your resources. They're not a drain on your infrastructure. They just spend their money, leave it here, and then they go home. Also, we're anticipating an additional $2 million in additional sales tax revenues each year. And you know, that ends up saving Spokane households an average of $1,000 a year in taxes. So there's another benefit for our community. And then $300,000 in hotel taxes a year. And what's great about this, perfect timing, obviously we know the hotel industry, the hospitality industry has suffered so much over the last year. So to be able to infuse all that, all those tax dollars in cash into the community is going to be really significant in our recovery. So the collaborative financing is really how we began here. The PFD had about $11 million that they put into this project. The city gave us $5 million, and then the parks gave us land. That left us short about $37 million, which is a little bit more than budget dust, but not quite insurmountable. So when I took over as CEO in 2018, we thought this was over. We couldn't get that. We couldn't get there with the money. And in 2018, the county came on board and said they would lend us the $36 million we needed. And then that just left us short $1 million, which was much more doable. And then the state came through in 2019 with $1 million for us, another $250,000 in 2020, and then we were just awarded $750,000 this year, which Colin might talk about what that's for later, I'm not sure. But so that got us to the $53 million. So the project that started out at $25 million several years ago was about $41 million when we first thought we were going to start for real, and then it ended up being about $53 million. And most of that is because we decided to make the building more of an iconic building and not just, you know, a giant, you know, metal building up on the hill, kind of like a Costco. We wanted it to be iconic and something that people were going to be able to see from all over the community. I know there's some things on my slides that I'm talking about. I know you can read slides, so I want you to just read those and get the gist, and then I'll just kind of give you a little bit more of a narrative rather than me reading the slides to you. So one other problem that we had was a little bit of a hostile landowner right in the middle of our parcel. And she'd been fighting the city and fighting the Parks Department for years, and actually was involved. We had filed a lawsuit against the city at the time we were trying to make this happen. There's a long story. You know, she had lost her business because the city had let a building attached to hers basically fall apart, and it had ruined her building. So there was a standoff, and at the time nobody would let me talk to her because the city attorneys, there was already a lawsuit, so they didn't want me to get in the middle of it. And I just said, listen, you guys, I can't get you any more sued than you already are. Let me just talk to her. And I took her to lunch, and really what I found out is she just wanted acknowledgement of the situation, right? She wanted to be acknowledged that the city had made a mistake. They had, you know, she lost her business over what happened. Yes, she wanted money, but really that wasn't the heart of it. It really was, she wanted to be heard. She wanted the acknowledgement, and she wanted to play a role in making this happen, right? She could save the day by selling us her land. And she wanted to she had an emotional, she really wanted to be a part of it. As a matter of fact, when it was over, when we came to an agreement, she actually gave me a bracelet, and she had the words conversation engraved on the bracelet. And she basically just said, you know, conversation is how we got here. So I think that's a really good lesson for all of us whenever we're dealing with situations, you know, with land and landowners and trying to make things happen, is it isn't always about the money. It seems like it's about the money, but it isn't always about the money. And I'm seeing that in another project that we're currently working on. We're trying to get some land for another project. And yes, the people that own the land want their fair value. Well, they want more than their fair value, but they also really want to be a part of making something happen. So the other thing I said is location, right? Our city sells itself. Our proximity to the airport, the increased number of flights that our great Spokane airport has added over the last few years, our downtown location, we're easy and walkable, we're beautiful, but we're still hip. I think the governing bodies can picture, well, I know they can picture their athletes and spectators and volunteers taking over our community, being all over the city and having a real presence as compared to some other bigger cities where they just sort of get swallowed up. And then of course, there's some other venues that are kind of out in the suburbs. And so they're not really having that same feeling of taking over a city and really like making a difference. We have a very unique package, and that is making a huge difference for us here in Spokane. And then finally, partnership, right? That is what we have done so well here. I mentioned the public entities. You know, Spokane Sports Commission was named Sports Commission of the Year a year or so ago. That is, you know, that is no fluke. They are small but mighty. Their success has been built on relationships and building that foundation of trust with governing bodies. People want to work with them. You know, they're fun, they act like a family, and then they make governing bodies feel like they're part of the family as well. And then of course, the final piece of this, which is really what you guys are most interested in, is design build partnership, right? So we have partnerships with the public entities, we have partnerships with our sports commission, and of course the design build process is also a partnership. It's a shared risk, you know, it's a shared relationship. I always say everything is figure outable. We have a lot of things that come up and everything can be figured out. And it's much easier and much more effective when everybody feels like they have a stake in maybe what the problem is, a stake in the solution, and a stake in making it happen. And then of course, sharing in the great reward and the pride of the project once it's completed. And even though, you know, they will hand this building over to me in a couple of months, and then the sports commission will start booking it, and we'll start seeing, you know, the dream come to reality. The Leidig and Integris team are a part of this, and they always will be, as is Davis and we're all part of this, and we always will be forever. Ashley can talk a little bit now about how she's going to make that happen.
Perfect. Yeah, thanks so much for teeing this up. So I'm on staff at Spokane Sports. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. Essentially, we're charged with bringing and executing major events for the Spokane region. So in a typical year, we'd host between about 60 and 70 championship events, which in turn, you know, generates a pretty significant economic impact for the city. So with the Podium coming online, it's a new facility, but it's a proven team. We've been around for 30 years, and we've put, gosh, hundreds and hundreds of events in Steph's facilities already. So we're pretty understanding of, you know, each other's role, what value we bring to the table. So this slide kind of breaks it down. On the left-hand side, you have the Spokane Public Facilities District. They're the owner, they're the management, everything getting us to this point. So the facility funding and maintenance, they're managing all of our contract services moving forward. And then of course they have a long resume of successful facilities already, and the Podium just kind of adds to that portfolio. And then Spokane Sports on the right-hand side, the organization that I work for, we're going to be doing everything more in the field of play. So scheduling the facility, bringing in new events, building out all our event plans, hotel plans, transportation, kind of anything with the game day management, continuing our marketing and media, athlete experience, hotels, medical, kind of everything that makes an event go and happen on event weekend. So I think even when we're looking back at the inception of this, you know, we were spending so much time in the convention center, like we were becoming the main tenant in that facility. And Steph really took the vision of what a sports specific facility could do for Spokane, and really, you know, took down a lot of obstacles to make it happen. So now we're about 85% complete with the project, and we're booking events. Our very first one is November of 2021, and we're booking events all the way through March of 2026 right now. So when we're looking at the economic benefits for this facility, it allows us to attract events to the region that were previously out of reach just due to our venue limitations. Another key thing that you might find interesting is kind of our core clients. So we work really closely with the US Olympic and Paralympic governing bodies. So if you think of like USA Gymnastics, USA Judo, USA Wrestling, those are kind of our core people that we work with to bring championships here. And then of course, the NCAA, the NAIA, there's kind of a whole sector of collegiate conferences that we work with. Our competitive bid process can be anywhere from about 9 months to our longest being, you know, 5 or so years by the time we'd be able to get a bid out the door. So we put in hundreds and hundreds of hours coming up with our event plan, how we're going to position Spokane as a competitive host city, what we're doing to kind of one up what their experience has been in other parts of the world. So certainly, pretty significant impact of what we do, and the positive benefits that it would bring to Spokane. The first certainly being the economic impact. So at maturity, so at our 5-year mark, we're hoping that this facility will make a $33 million impact on the city. And I think right now too, if we're going to be opening in the fall of 2021, it's a pretty important time for our region. So just, being in the driver's seat to make a really positive impact on our city is a huge opportunity for us, and a big responsibility that we're not taking lightly. So I'll talk a little bit about value propositions. So these are really some key factors to why we're having success with sales and marketing efforts for the Podium. The first is just our reputation. So we have a great reputation of being a host city. So always rolling out the red carpet. We have fans that rally, that show up on event weekend. We have a great pool of volunteers and officials that make these events go. And then the second is just our full services event services team. So we have a whole crew that's with you on event weekend that handles everything from like VIP transportation to checking in your officials to troubleshooting any athlete issues. It's kind of the team behind the team that makes events go. And then trusted facility management. I mean, the Public Facilities District does an amazing job with building and maintaining their facilities. They've been very just accommodating when we need adjustments made or making things a bit more athlete centric. And then the last one, which is probably the most important, is just the thought that the facility was designed with athletes in mind. This truly is a world-class facility. I think price tag right now we're sitting about 56 million. And with that, our marquee feature being that 200-meter hydraulically banked track, it's unbelievable how much interest there is in that component of it. The amount of clients and the number of events that are looking to come to Spokane that were previously out of reach, but it also translates to other sporting events. So even though we're known for track, that translates to beating a world-class judo facility or a world-class karate facility. And kind of talking about some of those design elements, having first-rate equipment and finishes, that's always something that comes up. Having a separation of all of our different floors, which I think Neil will talk about a little bit more. We're split into 3 different floors. Having athletes flow in mind, so where they enter, how they get to the warm-up space, out to the competition floor, how they exit back into drug testing. Just having a flow of people through the facility is something that we're hearing that our clients are loving. And then just having all the technical infrastructure in place. We've gone back and made some adjustments. So we've got a little bit more room for like broadcasting when NBC or ESPN comes in, for our timing equipment, for announcing, just kind of having all these factors in place that a governing body knows that they can come in and run a first-rate event. And then there's just some other elements that are appreciated, like the elevated seating. There's about a 6-foot wall that separates our seating from our competition floor. So just having that angle down, our governing bodies have loved. And then just having the natural light and the proximity that you can just go out our front door, walk to hotels and restaurants. It's just the ease of flow of an event is certainly well appreciated.
Great. So, hey, before we kind of move on, I forgot to mention in the beginning, there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. So if you do have questions, I've seen a few coming through the chat. Please do them in the Q&A. We're going to try to hustle through this the best we can. There's a lot here. It's going to be a little like drinking through a fire hose. So apologies for that. But anyway, that's where you can put your questions. We'll try to leave at least 10 minutes at the end where we can get to a lot of your questions. So to transition into design, so Stephanie, Ashley, thank you very much. I think that's a great intro and helping everyone understand, why the facility came about. And I think the economic impact it's going to have on Spokane and the region is amazing. It's what got me excited about this from day one. Not all of our projects are able to say that. So what you're seeing here, we'll just real quickly, this is an interactive 3D fly-through that we've put together for the Sports Commission to really help market this project. And I think they use this in all of their meetings right now with their prospective clients that are going to come in. And I believe it's really been helping. So we're going to post a link to this. I'm not really going to fly through it right now, but we'll post a link in the chat. I can't remember how many people can be in it at one time. So if you can't get in, just try back a little bit later and you'll be able to get in and fly around the building and click on a bunch of little interactive hotspots that tell you about different parts of the building. So pretty neat component. All right, well, let's kind of get into some of the building design here. Neil and I are going to tackle this, and I'm going to let Neil start off. I do want to say, you know, we had teamed with Davis Architecture and Neil early on, primarily because one, they're great designers. They also have they did a facility that was as the premier indoor track facility in Birmingham in the East, and had pulled a ton of events. So we really leaned on them hard for their expertise, not only in the track component, but also in all the other sports that we can host in this facility. So I guess, Neil, I'll turn it over to you here if you would like to talk about some of the trips we did and other items.
Always helps to unmute in a Zoom meeting. Thank you, Colin. Very nice introduction. We came on really as the sports component designer, whatever, in this effort. And it was from the beginning, the site offered a significant challenge, and fitting a track on that site was pretty challenging as well. But then it's more than just a track. It serves all multiple, if you think of it, they can do it in there, and the Sports Commission will find a way. But it's if we can go on to the plans, the building is served multiple purposes. We needed to respond to the site, so the initial design was driven by the impact of the site, where the views were, where people were arriving from, and how to fit this mass on the site. I think Colin did a masterful job in conceiving of a box that would meet all of those criteria and serve well in that respect.
Yeah, so let me, I'll kind of talk a little bit about, you know, how we got to some of, if you go back one slide, sorry, Christine. So to talk a little bit about what Neil was saying about the site, these are a few early sketches that we were looking at, and we did take a couple field trips early on, both Ocean Breeze to the Crossplex, which was what Neil's company, his firm designed a couple years ago, and also to University of Michigan, their indoor track facility. And one of the major components that we heard about was being able to separate the media, the patron, and the athlete. It was super, super important for a lot of these events that Ashley and her team were going to bring in, that the cross-pollination during events was actually not wanted. If you've ever been to these events, there's thousands of people on the floor and in the stands, and you want to try to keep separation as best you can. So some of the early designs that you see in these sketches really talked, it was about creating 3 levels in the spine. And the spine is the portion you see if you go out there on the site now, this big terracotta ribbon that rips through the building. And we knew early on that we had a huge box, right? You're not going to hide that. It really is the epitome of the colored tie on the gray suit. It is a box. It is a field house. It is 80,000 square feet. So how do you accentuate what's going on in this facility? And we early on decided if we stack all of this program and make this really fast, energetic spine that slices through the building, we can really mimic the athlete. And early on, this concept was all about athletes and how they're fast, powerful. They have no wasted energy. Everything is dialed in, and we wanted our building to be the same. So, you know, the intent, and hopefully you get this feeling when you visit the building, is that there is not a lot of fluff out there. It has a purpose, and it's supposed to invoke this feeling of energy and excitement as you go through it. The site was, as Neil was saying, you know, a very complicated site. Early on, we had a lot of sites we looked at. We looked at the north parking lot in this diagram where it says future development. We looked at the parking lot north of the arena. And though those would have been a lot easier to build on, the PFD owned that property, it wasn't the right thing for the community. We had a lot of meetings with the parks, with Barry and Garrett and that group, and also with the city. They donated money, as Stephanie said. So putting the project on the bluff made the most sense. It was the right thing to do, but it came with a lot of struggles and some complicated things that we had to work through that I think Andrew will talk about constructability later on that. But in the end, if you've been out there and you've looked at it, if you were on the park tour last week, or if you sat through their presentation, the marriage with the North Bank project and what this podium is doing is spectacular. I was out there last Friday and it was gorgeous. I would say that marriage was also really great from a standpoint of sharing some of the issues we had. They had a bunch of dirt they wanted to get rid of. We had a bunch of stormwater we had to get rid of. So being able to work with that team helped us do a lot of amazing things for the project. This diagram also talks a lot about the hotel and amenities from across the rivers. And I think when Neil gets into the floor plans and walks through that, you'll see that we have two separate entrances to this building. And there's a really important reason for that I'll let him talk about. And then, like I was saying, it's basalt and more basalt. So this thing sits on a big rock, and being able to deal with that was also an important aspect of this. Let's see. Real quickly, as all architects do, we went through a ton of different site explorations. I think we had over a dozen of these. Early on, we had an ice component, and that has now gone away to some other things. But a lot of these diagrams that you're seeing, they really played with this idea that we had to shoehorn this thing in there. The biggest complication with that site, other than the basalt, was we knew we were going to have to vacate Cataldo. And then even in vacating Cataldo, how do you squeeze a 140,000 square foot building between the cliff and Dean and get the access right into the building in the correct location? It was very apparent early on that our entrance wanted to be an extension of the Howard Street Promenade. And of I guess I would call it a public flow through to whatever's going to happen north, which, as many of you know, might be a stadium. So being able to connect all of these things 24 hours a day for the public, even when our building is closed, was one of the largest drivers that we had from all of the stakeholders. It was something when we sat through design review and everything else, everybody really, really wanted to see that. Lastly, before Neil gets into the plans, we did explore, a stadium component. This was back when the advisory vote came out. We looked at, okay, how could we get a stadium into our project? And it was going to grow, I think, 40 feet and then 30 feet in the other direction. But I think it was a fun exercise because it really helped us learn and explore more of the connections that we would have around the building for both bike groups in Spokane, pedestrian flow, and even our internal flow with our athletes and patrons. So with that, Neil, I'll let you kind of run through these plans.
Thank you, Colin. In the design of the facility, as Colin indicated, we were trying to keep the athletes, the press, and the public all separate. They have their separate entrances, and we were dealing, this is the public entrance, and it's coming from the two directions that Colin indicated, one from the south and the rest of the city in walking distance and wonderfully landscaped park. And then one from the north where actually most of the parking is. So we've got, whether you drive or whether you walk, we've sort of opened the building up to you in both directions. The most critical thing is once somebody enters the building, they've got to be sort of corralled into their different areas. The public, the athletes are immediately sent downstairs, either by stair or elevator. The public then is able to go into the facility, experience the concourse, and attend the event, which they do through the vomitories and on to the seating. We had certain criteria of seating we had to meet for NCAA events, and so the seating is both fixed, which is in front of and rises over the restrooms and concessions that run along there. And also portable, which would be for the athletes, and they would be on on the floor itself. Now downstairs, where we pull the athletes out, we come into sort of the clerking area, the check-in, the warm-up. There's a warm-up track down there, some restrooms. Then when it's not track season, that warm-up track area becomes lay-down space for volleyball teams, other groups that can mark off a little square and call it their own throughout the event. And we see that happen a lot. The flow through the whole place was very critical to make it easy to both operate events, which you want it to be because you're trying to attract some pretty heavy operators in NCAA and IAAF, but also so provide the space for the running of a good event. For a track, for example, the athletes will head north, and there is clerking, where an implement check-in, where they do their final paperwork and check off on everything before they then go and enter the competitive area. Inside that area, there's quite a few track events that are held there at various times during the week, or during usually a weekend of competition. Parts for training and everything else for other uses, and then the floor all flattens out. It's a hydraulic track, so then they can host other events. The flow from there then comes out of the off the floor and back underneath, and there we have drug testing, and it's very purposefully located so that in all these events after competitions, the availability of drug testing is very important. The rest of the floor was holding a space for an indoor track is quite large, and so we're winding up with a lot of space. We knew we would, and since the decision was made early on to go to hydraulic track, we are able to host other events in there as well. Here's a layout with volleyball, with the 16 courts, with basketball. We've got room for 9 courts, and then we've got wrestling with I think we're showing 25 there. But it's all set up to be versatile. The floor is the hydraulic track is strengthened so that it can support all those volleyball standards and everything else, be a very flexible facility for the city to host events. The third level, second level, the highest level in the building is for press, and it's accessed either directly off the floor by going up the bleachers, or there's a stair and elevator, same stair that served an elevator that served the lower level. And its connectivity is one, to keep it isolated, but also during events, there'll be times when coaches will need to go up to scoring, and so there's a way for them to do that without truly interacting with all the crowds. So that makes a very keeping press and access to the press down to a minimum is very important. So anyway, so we are trying to create a facility that's will be easy to operate, easy to draw important events like NCAA and IAAF track meets, as well as host all these other sports. And it's going to be a gold mine. It's going to be wonderful for Spokane. We're very excited to have been a part of it.
Yeah, and I want to give shout out again. I think that, Neil and his team. We've had people on his team involved for the last 2 years, checking into every OEC meeting and just making sure that we're not, there's some technical stuff that's going on out there. I mean, floor flatness requirements, the floor covering, the bleachers. So it's a venue that, you know, I think, and Neil, you could correct me, I think there's only 8 of them in the entire country, or maybe 7. So it's not like this is something that's been done that many times before. So,
Yeah, Colin, it's kind of like when this is complete, we will have done more than anybody else, and having done 2. So, they're very rare,
yeah.
but in growing in popularity.
Well, great. So yeah, I'll kind of we got a few renderings here. I'll just touch on them real quick. That first one was really about the connection from the park that we talked about. This one is really about showing the connection to downtown. I think Ashley hit on this earlier, maybe Stephanie did. You know, the biggest selling factor of this, other than the amazing job that they do running the facility and booking the facility, is its location. You know, we visited, like I said, 3 of these. Most of them are out in the outskirts. You have like a McDonald's or a Starbucks nearby, and maybe 1 hotel, and then you're basically Ubering or shuttling everywhere else. People can literally walk to this facility from a lot of different hotels and enjoy what Spokane has to offer. And I think that is what has so many people intrigued about starting to host events here. And then
one of the things that will make hosting events much simpler is its proximity to the arena and those facilities, because large events will require more than just what is there within the interior of the podium. So it's to have that additional community support facility right there is going to be a big help in drawing great events.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a great summary to our design part here is you know, looking at what the PFD does have to offer, both the arena and the convention center, being able to use all 3 venues to book larger events than maybe they'd be able to if it was a standalone facility. So, and with that, I think, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, we'll hand it over to CK here. A little background on this. We realized early on that this was an international building, and we probably were a little over our skis in trying to market this as an architecture firm. So sat down with Helvetica early in the sports commission and really started putting together a game plan for Ashley and her team to go overseas and make this building an icon. So.
Hey, thanks, Colin. It was great that Integris brought us in. We've had a long relationship with that firm. We've always enjoyed working with them. So it's been a delight for us to be involved in a sports venue. So the quote here kind of sums up what a brand is all about. And you can apply that to just about everything, including a sports venue. Go on to the next slide. So basically our branding for the facility is broken up into 5 key areas. And I'm gonna talk briefly about those. I'll spend a little more time on the naming and identity, but next slide. Yeah, I'm gonna spend a little more time on this because this is the deceptive one. This is the one that sounds so incredibly simple to name a facility, but it's actually a complex process and lots of consideration. And obviously that began with a lot of meetings to understand the facility, the intent behind the athletic events, what's happening, and also to talk about the types of names that we would want to explore, and as well as a criteria that makes for a good name. And those are all things that were discussed early on with the client and other people as well. Now, you all know that when this first became a public idea, it was called the Sportsplex. So that name had been out in the public for quite some time. There were a lot of people who actually liked it, and it served its purpose really, really well. But in the process of researching this, we found out that there were over 2,000 facilities in the US that have the name Sportsplex. And so we all agreed that that probably wasn't a great idea to move in that direction if we want to create distinction. So the other part of this was that we learned that what's been alluded to already, organizers, governing bodies, athletes, coaches, families, these are the key audience for this facility. And so understanding that's also critical in the naming development process. We also learned that because we're going to have local activities here for sure, but a lot of the big events are ones that are international or national events. And so you have a attendees coming outside the market. And that gives us a clue to some of the things that we might be able to do on the inside of the building to tell stories. So that's a good thing to know going into a situation like this. And the idea of branding a venue, not a city, is interesting. If you follow track, for example, you will have heard of something called the Armory or Hayward Field. And all of you have heard famous venues like Madison Square Garden, the Rose Bowl, or Wrigley Field. And if you're familiar with those facilities, you know where they're located, which is one of the reasons why we didn't want to use the word Spokane in the name. We felt that over time, they become synonymous, that the Podium is in Spokane, and therefore we didn't want to identify that in the name itself. And then the other big decision that was made early on was how to handle sponsorships. How do we call attention to sponsors, various parts of the building, without giving up the brand for the Podium? And that's an interesting discussion involving lots of folks, but ultimately that's what we decided to do, to make the sponsors subservient or secondary, so that the Podium is in the first position, or as we like to say, kind of think of the Podium as the title sponsor. And so that was discussed. And I'll give you a wonderful example of why we chose this route here in Spokane. In 1974, the Washington State Pavilion Opera House was dedicated. And because it's a long name, long names often get shortened, which is one of our criteria to come up with a short name that doesn't get shorter. It became known as the Spokane Opera House for years and years and years. And then in 2006, it became known as the INB Performing Arts Center. And 12 years later, it became known as the First Interstate Center for the Arts. And it'll likely change in the future. And that's actually wonderful for the sponsor. And in this case, probably great for the building. But that's not how you build a brand. If every so often the name of the building is going to change. And so that was a real key element of that as well. The other part of this is that we are pursuing a trademark. We had to have a clean name that we knew that we could get trademarked, as this is an international facility. And obviously we're able to score a domain name as well. The Podium USA was available to us in .com, so that helped a lot too. And then we moved on to, once the name The Podium was approved, we moved on to developing the logo or the symbol for the facility. And we created a video to help kind of showcase the typography and the symbolism, and to show kind of the overall visual range of how something like called The Podium has legs. So we'll go ahead and play that right now, Christine, if you don't mind. Go ahead and move to the, yeah, thank you. Basically, we're identifying all four sides of the building. And this happens to be the north soffit area. Next. And here we have the west wall, which is near the primary entrance off of Dean. And here we wanted to play with the idea of the Podium and the gold, silver, and bronze idea, which gave us some legs on the signage portion. And you can see inside the large gold ring, that is where the sponsor's name would appear. And it's been designed in such a way to we can swap that out over time without interrupting the rest of the sign. Go on to the next one. Yeah, and this is the south. It's kind of nice to have a symbol where you can pull out a portion of the logo and to actually use it in a big way. And so here we have this kind of mysterious symbol on the south side that you'll see as you walk through the park to the facility, or if you're driving up Washington, there's a great sight line for this as well. It's about a 16-foot diameter circle, basically. Next. A little bit about the interior signage and wayfinding. There's actually, in this facility, there's not a great deal of need for this. It's actually kind of fairly straightforward. But here we have some of the concessions area. There's a couple of concessions areas that were just recently named. So they'll get changed out to the proper names. Then we have an info area for visitors who are coming in to try to find where things are at. Next. And a little bit of signage that directs athletes and press people and things like that. And you can see how we kind of consistently use a common typeface, and as well as when we can take advantage of that perfect O representing the metal whenever we can as well. Next. This is the lower level. Neil and Colin have talked about this practice track, and to avoid collisions, we have these banners that are set up for track events that just make sure that people are paying attention, aware that there are people warming up on the track. Go to the next one. And a little bit about experiential graphics here. This is kind of an opportunity to tell stories in kind of a small, subtle way, but bring that down to a level that's right there on ground level for visitors. And so it's a nice way to tell stories. It's also a nice way to kind of bring some emotion and to make certain spaces within the facility more dynamic. So in the upper right there, we're dedicating a large wall to the legacy of sport here in Spokane and the Inland Empire. And we're featuring medalists, people who have not only gone to the Olympics from this area, the Inland Northwest, but also have actually medaled. And so each one of those medals, you'll see the name of the individual, their hometown, and what sport and what Olympics they attended and whatnot. And then we have a map, which actually helps for visitors to kind of understand where Spokane is relative to the rest of the Pacific Northwest. And then on the lower left, it's a smaller recessed area, and that particular area was set aside. The graphics are celebrating the fans. It's kind of getting cut off there. You're only seeing a partial of it. But these graphics are placed on metal panels so that sports organizers can place events, times, and things like that on this wall using magnets. So it's a way for families and fans and athletes to know when their next event is, the timing of that, and so on and so forth. So it kind of serves as it's kind of a practical solution as well. Next. And then, as you noted in the drawings, there are 5 entries, vomitories from the main concourse into the field house, and there's 2 of the 5 here. Each one's dedicated to a particular kind of event that appears here, that would happen here at the podium. And so we're using some photography and some graphics and some large elements to also identify the entryway, so that if you leave, you always know where you're at. You've got viewpoints of numbers 1 through 5 and things like that. And you can also see how we kind of continue this idea of the metal, in this case, in the form of rings. Next. And kind of one of the more interesting things that we're doing is on the lower level, alongside the warm-up track where the athletes are, is kind of gave this a lot of thought in terms of what to do with those walls. And so we have these 4 murals that are going to be running in a linear fashion, about 250 feet of them. And what we thought we'd do here is not necessarily, we want to think about it a little differently than might be obvious. We didn't want to show more athletes, and we didn't really want inspirational ideas. These are athletes at the high level that are already fairly inspired and dedicated and motivated. So we thought we'd do is kind of give this a sense of place. So upper left is a abstraction of the idea of metals, the idea of using the circles and shapes to infer that. Upper right, we have the Pacific Northwest, where we're located here in kind of a nice abstract way. Lower left, we have the idea of the podium, the name. So these things are fairly sizable, and lots of different first, second, and third in the podium graphics as well. And then on the lower right, we have really a mural that's dedicated to the track itself. It's colored the same as the track. And the lanes and the numbers and things like that are used throughout. Can you go on to the next one? And have a little fun here. The bottom portion are the entries into the privacy walls for the men's and women's restrooms, where we took a different take on the traditional figures that you see on signage. And then the same thing on the upper portion there as well. We're having a little bit of fun with the standard code signage and putting medals around necks, things like that whenever possible. Yeah.
Yeah, CK, thank you very much for that. I think, you know, it's so important to understand the importance of graphics to our buildings. And I know with all the architects on this Zoom that we all really appreciate experiential graphics and what companies like yours bring to the table to help us really extend our creativity to the next level. I did want to give a quick shout out. And before I do this, I will say, you know, we are running a little late, as always, when you got a bunch of passionate people talking about something that happened. So Andrew and I are going to hit the construction part of this real quick. We'll try to get through it in say 10, maybe 15 minutes. I think we're scheduled till 1:15. I do want to leave time for Q&A. So if you can stay a little longer, I think maybe everyone on the panel can stay a couple more minutes if we need to. But yeah, shout out to the Spokane Arts. If you haven't had the opportunity of sitting through a public art process, I would highly recommend it. This is the second one I've sat through, and it is very inspiring to see what these artists bring to the table by just looking at your building and hearing your story. And so these are the early concepts of both the interior art piece and the exterior art piece. The interior art piece by Clayton Binkley and Taiji Miyasaka. Taiji, as many of you know, if you're from this area, is a WSU professor in the architecture program. And then the exterior art called Aspire is by a collaborative group called Acrylicize. So both of these are in mock-up stage. They actually have a lot of them being built. We have the footings in the ground for the exterior art. So anyway, super excited to see these become a reality. And thanks again to Spokane Arts for making that a reality too. All right, so the design, build, construction aspect. I'm gonna hit on a few things really quick and then turn it over to Andrew, and then he's gonna run through some fun videos that Lytix put together and kind of the story of what they've done. The design build part of this, there's a video that we'll watch here. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's really not as much about drinking the Kool-Aid, but I wanted to show it more to get people that haven't done a lot of design build understanding that you can do really high quality design with design build. So we'll watch this video real quick, and then I'll come back and talk about some components.
You learn early on, I think, once these things are happening, that architects aren't perfect, contractors aren't perfect, and owners are a long ways from perfect. So how do you expect to ever get to a result if you're saying you have to do this and you have to do it at this amount of money? And I mean, just creating conflict. Design build gets rid of all of that, right? It puts everybody on the team.
I think as an owner, we have a responsibility to make an effort to ensure that the design excellence and the contractor are both equally met. The way we've done that at the University of Washington with our integrated design build project is delivery method is to build that right into the contract. It says the governance structure shall be, and the project management team is equally represented.
I do hear that there's a perception that quality can suffer or that design can suffer if the architect is, contracted under the contractor. And we've really found the opposite. We've found that by having that expertise at the table, we were able to explore design ideas that we wouldn't have felt comfortable exploring without them at the table at that point in the project. So we actually have a pretty ambitious design because we've had that expertise early on.
The projects that we've been a part of, we give the design team the parameters that we feel like they have to work within, and then we work together to solve design challenges. But they can do that in design build because they have someone sitting next to them on the left or the right that's a contractor or an engineer that's still working towards the same goal. And so if they have a specific design element that they want to maintain or that they want to preserve, we can say, okay, let's start to talk about values and how can we understand what's most important from a design aspect, from a programmatic aspect that still supports the budget, the schedule, and the quality.
Just because the contractor carries the contract and we work for them, if it's a good contractor, they're still going to understand the value of the architect in pre-design. Yeah, are they going to push back a little bit more on cost certainty and force you to, really dig into your materials and details? Yeah, but they should, right? That's the beauty of design build. At the end of the day, we're keeping everybody on the team accountable, and it allows me to do the same in the field.
The owner, busting that earlier myth about they lose control, they actually have a very similar experience to what they would have had in the old world, where they just dealt with the design team before they even talked to a general contractor. But the added bonus is they have all that constructability input, and it can be even more direct depending on how much of the team they engage early on. And the result is more value. So if you do a progressive design build project and you've got all these folks integrated and being as creative they can with each other, not in their own silos, you can expedite a project. If you can cut 20% off of the duration of the project, that's financial burdens that can be relieved. It's general conditions that are reduced. So the materials cost what the materials cost, the labor is what the labor is. But if you can be efficient in the way you actually execute the project, there is a lot of opportunity.
It creates predictability in the cost and the schedule, and that is tremendous for an owner to understand what it is. And then by working efficiently, you can probably get more value.
So quality should never be the issue. Timeliness is everybody's responsibility, and it does control the costs. It really does, because every decision is made with the budget in mind.
Yeah, so that's really good. And I think the main reason I wanted to show that is, during my time doing design build, and it's primarily the work I do over probably the last 7 or 8 years, there's always the question to me is, how can you still design good buildings with design build? And it doesn't matter the delivery method, it matters the team. And I think people say this time and time again. So I want to go through 4 things, just real quick. I'm going to take about a minute and a half. 4 things that on all the design build projects I've done over the years have felt like, from a design side, the things that we really need to help contribute to make a successful project. The first is the charter, and it's not so much about the end result of the charter that I think is a thing to hang your hat on. It's the creation of the charter. What goes into this are many meetings and casual meetings, fun meetings, having a beer with somebody, having lunch with somebody, getting to know somebody. If I can get to know the mechanical superintendent, and he's got a similar hobby I do, and we can talk outside, something different not about work, it becomes to where he respects what I'm trying to do, and I respect what he or she is trying to do. So I think at the end of the day, it's about the creation of the charter, but I think every good design build project definitely needs a charter. The next one that I really think we always need to have is a pull planning process. This is kind of becoming old school now, but I've seen people do it wrong. It's a buzzword that gets thrown out there. I think a successful pull plan has to then be implemented into something that the team can utilize throughout the course of the project. So you have to digitize it. You have to make it cloud-based. You have to make schedules that are easy for everybody on the team to understand. You can't just be posting your CPM schedules up there. The owner needs something that's a little higher level that they can flow with throughout the entire course of the project. And then having these twice-a-week huddles. They're no more than 20 to 30 minutes, and they're just a look ahead, and they're just trying to make sure that everybody understands to stay on task and to focus their energy on the work they need to be doing at that point. Where as designers, we get into the weeds, as you guys all know, and we can go down a rabbit hole that we don't need to be going down. The third one that I think is imperative to every good design build project, which most of us are doing now, but again, I think it can be done right or wrong, is really good clash detection. We implemented BIM 360 on this project. It was basically real time. Everyone knew exactly what was being updated at every given point in the design process. We had our Lighting and Apollo team, our mechanical contractor, did an amazing job of clash detecting for us. We had so many early procurement packages on this because of schedule and trying to get price points that we were actually fabricating steel while our mechanical design was still in process. So if we did not have a very good clash detection process, I guarantee you we would have had ducts flying through beams and everything else. And you can see in this image here, it's a very complicated, tight building, and you just can't do that without BIM 360 and having even 3D model review that we did on site with our lighting partner. And then the last one that I think is super, super important is on-site design. This is Blanca Rodriguez. She's probably going to be embarrassed that I'm throwing her face up here, but she is our project architect. She's been amazing, has done a lot of the heavy lifting for me, obviously, out there on this job. And there's a couple portions of being on site. In the old days of architects designing and handing it off during construction, I do not believe that it equates to a successful project. And it's no fault of the contractor. It's just that contractors, as we know, are driven by schedule. They have to stay on schedule. And if you're not available, they want to do right by your design. They do. But if you're not available, they're going to move ahead without you. So we really have done a good job of getting Blanca out there, or myself, having some presence out there. There's been weeks where she's been in the trailer for a full day or 2 days. So she's accessible for answers. And then having a lead designer out there, I make sure I go out there once a week so that people understand, keep trying to understand the vision that we have on this project. I've never been a fan of the lead designer getting through SD or DD and then checking out and never seeing the project again. And then the live punch list. That's a very important thing. Punch lists have always they get this negative connotation. Our goal on jobs like these design build projects is when we get to C of O in that time frame, we don't have any punch list items left. It's not a negative to have a continual punch list. And what all that does is it helps our contractor partner maybe put out some fires before they get too big, right? So that's really the intent. All right, so went through that really quick, but I think it's good information. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew with Leidig, and he can talk about some of the construction.
Yeah, thanks so much, Colin. As you know, I'm a huge proponent of design build myself, but I think you really touched on all the elements I would have wanted to address myself. So thanks for doing that. I think this is an absolute case study in the right way for a design build project to go. And as we started off this presentation, we were blessed with a really good project team, from owner to design team, and all of our contractors and subcontractor partners are just doing a fantastic job. So I think I'll do a quick little run through of some of our construction challenges and highlights. I think a lot of it touches on some of the notes Colin and Neil shared with us on the front end of this presentation, but why don't we just kick on through and start taking a look at what dealing with all that basalt was all about there.
We're here today to celebrate the construction of the Sportsplex.
Yeah, so it's been a little over a year since that portion of the project, but I did not want to lose sight of the successes we had there. We'll talk about them in just a moment, but some pretty exciting stuff going on there with blasting. Our neighbors, the Department of Homeland Security, was not incredibly excited about a lot of explosives going off next door, but they worked with us. They worked with us pretty well. Colin introduced the entire project team and some of our key subcontract partners. I just wanted to recognize the lighting team out there. Ryan Ford is our lead superintendent. Thaddeus Baker running our self-performed concrete work. John Hurley as supplemental superintendent, just kind of bird dogging a whole bunch of the specialty items in that building. And then Teresa Desitel, our project engineer. But moving along, Christine, I think we pretty much touched on everyone here. I wanted to use this slide just to kind of hit one more time on the early design collaboration that went in, not just amongst the design team, the Integris engineers, the Davis and Integris architects, but our steel supplier, Allied Steel out of Montana, and our steel erector, American Iron Works, we all got in conference rooms together along with structural engineer to come up with the best way for the large trusses that hold this field house roof up, what the connections look like, how to size these things to get them properly and safely in the air. And then Pearsall Construction, we'll talk about here in a moment, who helped us come up with a fantastic value engineering idea, not just deciding to blast this site instead of hammering it for months on end, but to actually go ahead and crush some of that rock on site, which we'll take a look at in just a second here. But I think Stephanie did a great job touching on some of this. This is a large parcel. It sits on top of what used to be Cataldo Avenue, running east-west there from the stadium. We were kind of on hold there towards the end of 2019, awaiting some very last-minute city council votes approving that. But just a fantastic collaboration between private and public property owners to get this thing off the ground and get us moving. Wanted to use this slide to talk quickly about some of the adjacent developments that are just about to start, and some of the other interested parties out there. So we had a lot of collaboration on the front end with the Spokane Indian tribe. This is a relatively sacred area for them. They wanted to have some input on what the design and construction was going to look like. So we were happy to work with them on the front end. They were fantastic to deal with. We have a developer to the west of Sportsplex planning on doing a 6-story tower right there behind the red Ram building, and a 14-story tower to the left behind that white building. So their projects are moving forward at this time. They know they're coming. So we spent a good deal of time sitting down with their design team as we tore up West Cataldo for our utilities. We collaborated them both on design and financially to properly size the sewer, water, and electrical lines that we brought in from Howard. So just a great job of thinking ahead. The city of Spokane really supported us in those endeavors. They were happy to see that street only tore up once, despite 2 or 3 separate projects going on in that area. So again, just a fantastic job by a real solid team. And thanks, Christine, moving forward here. Colin touched on this as well. We have this gorgeous new North Bank Park Ice Age playground going on right below the cliff from our project. The first parts of that project are visible there in the bottom side of that slide. I think that project's going to open up here in just a couple of weeks. That should be really exciting. But Colin had mentioned that if you could go back one real quick, Colin had mentioned we had this fantastic negotiation with them that resulted in us basically taking 4,000 yards of their contaminated dirt, burying it and capping it underneath our building. In exchange for that, they are taking every drop of our stormwater from that site and dumping it into their stormwater system that they constructed as part of their project. Just a huge win-win for both public entities there. I just wanted to highlight that. And then this fantastic connector ramp, this switchback ramp you see in lower left right there, that was a side agreement between the PFD and Parks that had Leidig go ahead and design and construct that ramp with our partners at Land Expressions to continue that flow from the Howard Street Promenade all the way up onto the Sportsplex property, going right there along the Sportsplex west side and dumping that flow right onto Dean to continue northbound towards North Central High School. So just a lot of collaboration before we broke ground out there. I gotta say it all went pretty darn smooth, but if we keep running forward, you know, I did want to touch on this. If anyone does remember a few years back, this neighborhood was, it needed some improvements. There was a lot of falling down old buildings, dirt parking lots. It was not the showpiece that it's turning into here as the North Bank continues to develop with the park, the Sportsplex, and these upcoming tower projects. Leidig's really happy to be part of this transformation of the North Bank. And it's really cool to see it coming along. So really quick, touching on that blasting and following up on the cool video we started off with here. It was our partners at Pearsall that really explored the cost and the time involved with either hammering out all of the basalt that makes up the southern half of this property, or engaging in some of the tricky and highly precise blasting that it would involve. We decided to go forward with blasting. What you see here is what came out after a blast. We had boulders from the size of softballs and oranges up to basketballs, and even a couple ones the size of a Volkswagen like you're seeing here. And I think the best part of their early design involvement, if you move forward one slide, is that we broke down their massive rock crusher from their yard in Airway Heights and transported it out to the Sportsplex site. So all of the rocks that came up as part of blasting were used on site, crushed as you're seeing right there, down to a 2-inch, 3-inch minus product. Working with our geoengineers and geotech partners, we decided that would be a suitable fill for the substrate of the building. So we have this fantastic fill that compacts, that drains, and prevented us from thousands and thousands of yards of export and importing clean and suitable fill. And we were just able to use what we had, manipulate it on site with a big old rock crusher, and build our building right on top of that material. Just a fantastic cost savings and time savings for the project. Moving forward there. Yeah, I wanted to do this great shot there. Colin had mentioned that we engaged in a partnership with the Parks Department. Underneath that black tarp at the bottom of the screen is 4,000 yards of technically contaminated dirt that they needed to get off of their site. So very early on in the project, we constructed this temporary road down there. We worked with our engineering partners, constructed that temporary road generally where we built that switchback ramp. So we only had to kind of construct that mound one time. Really worked out for us well, both on the front end and the back end. Got all that dirt out of there. In exchange, they took all of our stormwater. Great deal for us. And then, as Colin mentioned, just a quick time lapse here of this spine. Not only is that spine, and we can move forward with the video, thank you. Not only is that spine an architecturally eye-catching feature, it is structurally the spine of the building. All of the trusses that extend over the field house, attached to the concrete and steel structure running north and south through, again, what we're calling the spine. So just a great time lapse here of the Leidig crews constructing the cast in place walls prior to the steel going in out there. But some of these walls 30, 35 feet tall, 8, 10 inches thick at certain locations, constructed a little bit through the winter and into early spring. But just a fantastic job by the concrete crews, working in close collaboration with the structural engineer team, and got this critical element of the project done really quickly, so we could move right into, I think is on the next slide here, our steel work. And bear with me for one more shameless Leidig marketing video. Thank you. So again, hitting on that spine construction, which was really critical for us to get moving on what was really one of our biggest challenges on the project here, which is our 260-foot long inverted bowstring trusses. Cannot stress enough how important it was for us to sit down in the same room with the engineers, the company that was going to fabricate all this steel, and the company that was going to put all this steel in the air. We spent a lot of time and a lot of collaborative effort to make sure that we did this and something that could be done quickly, something that could be done cost effectively, but most importantly, something that could be done safely. These trusses went up in 3 different sections. You can see the shoring that held them up as they were being bolted together. And then you can see one of our easterly portions of that truss sitting on the ground right there, screen left. We're moving forward 1 slide here. Just a great shot. I mean, these are behemoths. They are about 90,000 pounds a piece just for one of these sections. A great deal of thought and care went into these. We, as a general contractor, sequenced our project to basically stay the heck out of these guys' way for their entire time on site. I think it's safe to say there was a large exhale all around when that last one got into place. I think that might even be on the next slide, Christine. But the topping out ceremony on this project was probably the most important one of my career. Just having no injuries, no accidents, for the amount of steel that went up there, the awkward shape of that steel, the size of it, just something we were all really proud of, including our lead architect, Colin here, who has coined a new phrase on this project that I guess we're just gonna have to live with. Moving forward 1 slide there. The slab on metal deck obviously was another key component here. It went in relatively smoothly, again, in great deal thanks to the thoughtful efforts that went in on the front end, making sure we could get our metal deck in as the steel columns and beams were going in. It just really allowed us to shave a lot of time off this schedule. And moving forward, yeah, I just really wanted to include this great shot here. The mechanical room for this building, Colin had touched on it a bit when mentioning the BIM 360 efforts. It's kind of foreground here, 3rd level, just above the raker beams that form up the bleacher section there. But basically the first half of that entire floor is nothing but our mechanical room. While it's a very congested room, it helped us keep the roof of this building completely clean. There's not so much as an exhaust fan on the roof of this field house. There's no package units. There's no pumps. There's nothing up there besides a roof hatch, and it's going to look really clean from some aerial shots for marketing purposes in the future. And moving forward, trying to wrap up here. Did want to recognize our unofficial mascot on the project. We had a very pesky osprey that was trying his darndest to build a nest on the top of those steel columns you see there along the spine, and to his dismay, the nest never held, so he left us with a rainbow trout that he pulled out of the Spokane River about every morning in the month of June 2020. So I can neither confirm nor deny if there is a dead rainbow trout in the metal deck of that building right now. So and then really quick, just wanted to touch on the envelope here, working with the Integris team on exploring cost efficiencies and constructability of what we were going to build, both the exterior condition of the corrugated perforated metal panel feature, and then the interior exterior condition of these walls. So we had a few different conditions while continuing exactly this same feature there. I think it worked out really well. Obviously a gorgeous curtain wall system there to the southwest. Really proud of. Our partners at Axiom knocked all that out of the park for us. Did want to recognize the gorgeous work being done by our partners Pick Electric and Apollo Mechanical in the project. Moving forward. And then just a great shot. This is about a week ago here in the field house. The hydraulic track has now been installed. What you're seeing there is a fire treated marine grade plywood that's been installed over that. We have got a chance to play with our new toy. This thing goes up and down, up in about 2 minutes, down in about 4 minutes. And as you can see, that field house is getting cleaned out rather quickly right now as we prepare to put in the poured in place 1/2 inch thick athletic rubber surface that's going to go throughout this 85,000 foot field house. Finishes are going on right now. What you're looking at on the left side there, behind the cross bracing, is the interior metal panels. There'll be a flat perforated panel system on the interior of the concourse, playing off what's going on the outside of that concourse. The real world images here, these are terrible photos. It looks much better in person, but those are the tile mosaics for the men's and women's public restrooms. And then trying our best to show these really cool lights going down the warm-up track, kind of in the direction that the runners should be running down there. But just really exciting after all this time to see lights going in, tile going in, and finishes going in. There's me walking down this ramp. This is now finished up and landscaped. This fantastic connection piece between the North Bank Park and the Sportsplex. You can see running right up the middle there as one of the Parks Department requests was a scramble for the kids or more billy goat parts of our community to scramble up this while people take the long way switching back. But our partners at Land Expression did a fantastic job. And then they're just kind of wrapping up here, shooting for substantial completion towards the end of September. Excited to see some of the first events getting in here, and continue to be excited to see Sports Commission and PFD booking more events and very, very large, substantial events for this facility. And just really excited to be part of a team that's gonna help Spokane bounce back after a very difficult year here. So thanks much, and glad to answer any questions during the Q&A portion. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for all those beautiful construction photos. And yeah, shout out to our structural engineers. You know, we have in-house structural, and they were invaluable in those trusses. A part of, you know, the interesting about those trusses is it really allowed us to lower our roof and save some cost. I think we lowered it, I could be butchering this, it was about 10 feet or something. Yeah, by doing inverted bowstrings, just so we could get sight lines from the bleachers. So it was really kind of a cool component. But I do want to thank everybody. We still have 70 people on. I know we're 10 minutes over. We have one question in the chat. I don't, unless I'm missing something, I only see one in there. So it's probably geared towards me. So it's talking about, was there consideration on how to design the facility to engage the community versus putting its back towards Washington and having internal access only? I think, you know, the question here is active storefront businesses open during the week and non-event days and things like that. You know, I think early on we did, especially when, you know, Stephanie was mentioning the partner's property that we had to purchase, and we had talked about how do we integrate maybe her business and some other businesses into the facility. You know, the sad truth between a lot of these projects is there is a budget. There is a back door that needs to happen. There is a belly button on every building, obviously, that you've got to have access and other elements like that. And Andrew could shed a little light on this, but I want to say that we are, even with a $5 or $6 million track component, we're barely around $300 a square foot on this facility, which is super impressive. So it kind of tells you how constrained the budget was. And that probably leads to a lot of the answer to that question is pretty quickly we realized we just do not have the budget to start putting other incubator businesses into the building. And I think another note on that is I don't believe a lot of the PFD projects do that already. It's not kind of the game that they play or the world that they're in, but it was considered. We did talk to Design Review a lot about how to beautify the Dean and Washington fronts as best we can. You'll see some art going along Dean that's going to really make that not feel like a horrible street to walk down. And then Washington, also, you know, putting some windows on that side of the building and having a Parks and Rec style of entrance over there is going to help that out. So hopefully that answers the question.
Looks like we have one more question, Colin. How was this 3,000 spectator seating capacity determined?
Yeah, I think Neil hit on that earlier, but Neil, I'll let you take that one if you want.
You're still on mute, Neil.
I'm so sorry. Anyway, Zoom, what can I say? It was driven by NCAA. They wanted 3,500 seats, so we have 2,500. They wanted, their current standard is 3,000 seats. They're planning to increase their standard to 3,500. And so we had to get it, we got it with 2,500 fixed seats and 1,000 movable seats.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll throw out there, if you didn't feel comfortable asking questions on the chat, you know, you guys, my email's out there publicly, so shoot me an email and I can forward it on to the right people on this panel if you'd like to get other questions answered.
Great. Well, thank you, everyone. What a great presentation, and what a gem that we have coming to Spokane, and what an economic benefit we're all going to reap, and some great events that we're going to all be able to see as well. So just want to thank the whole design build team for joining us. Colin, it was a Podium part 1. Does that indicate that there might be a part 2 coming down the line in the fall?
Yeah, definitely, Stephanie. We're hoping to do an actual tour when obviously the pandemic and the governor and everybody allows us to go through things like that. So the building slated to be complete into September, Andrew. I think we're still on track for that. So I guess working with the owner, we'll look at October-ish, November, and try to get people in the building if we can.
Absolutely.
Well, stay tuned. We'll hope to get that scheduled through AIA and offer more opportunities, not only to see the building, but to get some continued education credits. So it's a wrap for Architecture Month. Normally I'm going through and doing a plug for more events, but we're done after today. Wraps up a great month. We had a great committee led by Georgia Harder, and just want to thank the whole committee for doing their part in reaching out to their firms and getting some great topics that fit into our resilience in architecture. So all in all, 11 webinars, 1 in-person event, and we had an attendance of over 500 different people logging into our Zoom events. So that's just great. And I can't say a year later, after a lot of Zooming, people are still interested, and we appreciate that. We appreciate the support. So I'm going to wrap up by saying that our winner for the $50 gift card is Owen Turnbull. And congratulations. We'll make sure and get an email from you and an address, and get that card sent out to you. So with that, I don't have anything further. Just thank you again to the panelists, and thank you to all the attendees for making a very successful presentation today in Architecture Month. And that's it. Have a good afternoon, everyone.